I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All the Mods 9 to the Sky. Now today, I will warn you, this episode is going to be very, very technical. And the reason being is mechanism, right? We need to dive even further into mechanism, and that means that we are going to have to set up a fission reactor. And we need to take the fission reactor. We, for one, need to make the fuel for it. We need to make sure it's sustainable and doesn't actually explode, which this is actually a very dangerous sort of reactor to build. And we also need to make sure to handle the byproducts effectively. And speaking of byproducts, that's actually what we're after, because to be able to actually make red matter, which is the real thing we want, we're going to need polonium pellets, and we're also going to need antimatter down the road. So polonium pellets is just a product of that process. And the sooner we set this up, honestly, the better. Now, this process is going to require a lot of steps, and there's going to be a lot of things technically required in order for us to even get started today. And that is going to be, one, having an area that we actually need to set up in order to place this thing, because it is quite large. And so I've started expanding on the roof here to kind of accommodate for such a place. We're also going to need sulfur dust, quite a lot of sulfur dust, and quite a lot of uranium ingots, and fluorite for this whole process. And of course, water, and we're going to get into all of that here in a moment. Now, I essentially want to use all four of these quote unquote sectors right here on all four sides. I want to get them all placed in, and mechanism is going to eventually be able to utilize all four of these spaces between the fission reactor, the fusion reactor, and all of the parts in between. But now, in my personal opinion, I find that actually making the fissile fuel is harder than the actual reactor setup part. Unless you don't consider it separate, I would consider it separate. Making the fuel is incredibly important, and making sure you have enough fuel is probably even more important. Now, to get started, some of the things I'm definitely going to want right off the bat is going to be sulfur seeds. We need sulfur seeds immediately, because we can use sulfur seeds to produce sulfur dust. And this is pretty awesome, because this is what we actually need in the main process of making our fissile fuel. Of course, this is going to be used a whole lot, the sulfur dust. You're going to be needing a ton of it, and you're also going to need a ton of uranium ingots also. So we're going to need both of those seeds, maybe more than one of them. So yeah, and as you may have noticed, I have my gear in here because we should technically upgrade our gear into the next tier. So all I have to do that is upgrade it into vibranium while I'm working on all these other processes. Might as well get this done. And we can see what that looks like in here. Ooh, that is some fancy armor. I actually really like that as far as the theme goes in the base. But we are going to take this off, and we're going to upgrade it all the way up to the unobtainium, since we did gather all of the unobtainium, and this gear is beautiful looking. Very, very nice. We are all kinds of colorful, but I do want to disable my helmet because I just like to see my face. Now back to the task at hand, which is getting this upgraded and making sure we have enough. Now, I'm not really worried about having a lot of this stored up. I really want to make sure that whatever we have set up as far as fissile fuel production, I just want to make sure that these are producing fast enough. And that's something we're probably going to have to work on down the road once we actually get the thing running. So now back to the task at hand, and that is ultimately setting up all of the machines to produce the fissile fuel. And this is where our mighty setup that I have behind me is going to come into play. So this allows me, and I set this up a few episodes ago, this allows me to set up all kinds of high-end alloys for mechanism. And that's going to be very important because we're going to need it. For example, when we make chemical oxidizers, chemical infusers, rotary condensators, chemical dissolution chambers, and enrichment chambers, and the, of course, isotropic centrifuge, or isotropic centrifuge, whatever you want to call it. All of those machines are going to be needed in this setup, and tons of them. But I also want to use a couple of other things. For example, I want to use quantum entangleporters, which are also a very expensive machine. And this here quantum entangleporter is how I want to effectively send my items and my fluids around throughout the base. Now, these also allow for scalability, and this particular fissile fuel setup is going to be very scalable. So if we need to bring up the production rate, all I have to do is just add more machines. This is the same setup that I ended up creating over in All the Mods 9, and in my opinion, is like the icing on the cake. It is fantastic for setting up fissile fuel, and it really allows you to know exactly what chemicals you're working with. So now to set this up and to explain it as simple as possible, I'm going to break it down into 3 individual sections. We have one that is going to be producing sulfuric acid and all of the machine processes, which is one of the bigger sort of setups. And then we also have making uranium oxide, which is another one. And then we're going to have a section that is going to be combining all of those together to make our fissile fuel. And I think in setting that up, on the left side, we're going to start with our sulfuric acid process. And then back here is actually going to be where we're going to have some of our secondary sort of things that are going to need to be produced that are just sort of common. Like, for example, hydrogen, oxygen, and we also need water vapor that's produced back here, and so on and so forth. So first things first, let's place down a quantum Entangloporter. And I want to go into the settings here, and I just want to make sure everything is turned off. This is going to make it a little bit easier for me to configure everything when we start to produce materials and send it into this. And so I can create a configuration card that essentially allows me to just completely wipe one of these. So I'll take our configuration card and shift right click, and now this quantum Entangloporter is now linked. And so if I grab another quantum Entangloporter, let's grab quantum Entangloporter. We should have a whole bunch of them laying around there. If I go ahead and now place this down, you'll see that inside we have all of our configurations, but as soon as I right click on this, this should now be empty on everything, which is going to be a lot. It's going to be pretty helpful. That way we don't accidentally start filling this thing with materials. So now for the fun part, actually setting up all of these quantum Entangloporters. So I should be able to simply right click to configure all of these, making sure they are all blank. And then now I have an electrolytic separator set up. So this is producing oxygen and hydrogen from water. And then over here, we have a rotary condensator. So we need to actually produce water vapor with this one. And I'm pretty sure we just need to allow the water to go in. So fluids, you can see this is all set up and also has a configuration on its own. We want to make sure the back is allowed to be an input. And then I believe we just want to switch it to the condensator mode, and that is going to start producing water vapor. Now, as of right now, we are not sending that water vapor anywhere, and we shouldn't be able to yet. But I do want to make sure that we send it, for example, into this quantum Entangloporter. And so now what I want to do is I want to start naming these. For example, I know that the left side here, if I go ahead and clear this out by default, if we set this to auto eject, it's going to automatically on the left side send our hydrogen. So I don't really have to configure anything here. So I should just be able to go into this menu and I can type in hydrogen. Just like so. And then I can now assign this Entangloporter to the hydrogen channel. And so this is how we're going to be setting up a ton of these things. And then, for example, this one, I'm going to go in and I'm going to type this and I'm going to say oxygen. Just like that. So now we have an oxygen channel, and then that one is stored to this machine. Then all I have to do is just sort of allow the input to go into this machine. Now by default, if I turn on the auto export here, it's still not going to send it because we've not allowed for that to go in here yet. So I want to make sure to allow the input into this machine, and you can see now hydrogen is starting to go up. And same for this machine, except on the opposite side. I'm just going to allow from that machine that we can see now, and this should allow oxygen to hopefully go in here. If I set that up under the gases, not under the fluids channel, which is my bad. So there we go. There's the input, and now we have oxygen going in. And the same goes for most of these. I'm just going to be setting that to water vapor. And for example, I think this water vapor is considered a fluid. I could be wrong, or maybe it is a gas. Either way, I'm going to have auto eject turned on both of those, making sure that it's outputting to the right side. And then I just need to allow, for example, fluids. Let's see that. Maybe it is a gas. There it is. It's a gas. So there we go. So I just have allowed that to go in. And what we're going to be able to do with these quantum Entangloporters is we're going to be able to use them in our setups by just adding a new quantum Entangloporter. It allows us to wirelessly send all of the mechanism stuff around. Now, another thing, because these machines are so noisy, I am going to be utilizing muffling upgrades. Now, you don't have to use muffling upgrades. You can go in here and individually configure each sound. But yeah, this is something that you definitely do as well. Now, back onto this. so essentially I have these assigned to, for example, sulfur dust, this is assigned to fluorite, and this is assigned to uranium ingots. And so all of these need to have that operation happening. And so I'm going to need to create sulfur dust crafting recipes. So this right here is a crafting recipe for that. And I think uranium we already have set up, but fluorite, well, that's another one that we do not have just yet, but that one is just a quick seed away. And there we go. So once we have the fluorite seed ready to go, then we can build the recipe for that. And then we're almost ready to go. Like, we are about to really start to jump forward inside of our progression here. So I'm going to grab one of those, get that placed in. I just have to wait for the essence to build up once, and then I'm able to put it inside of our essence drawer. And there we go. This thing is rocking and rolling and ready to start producing the fluorite essence. And then I think we should be able to build a recipe off of this. So yes, 8 of them make 8. So yeah, we're probably going to need a lot more of these. I don't think though that fluorite is needed a whole lot in this operation, definitely compared to our other materials, for example, like the sulfur dust and also the uranium. But still, whenever we set these up, we want to make sure the dust goes in here. We want to make sure that we also add our crafting card so that way it can craft it as needed. And that is going to be all of the essential sort of materials needed that are outside of just the machines converting all of our products. So now back to making the sulfuric acid. And so to do this, all we're going to need is a chemical oxidizer. And this is going to essentially take our sulfur dust and turn it into sulfur dioxide. That sulfur dioxide then is going to get sent over to a chemical infuser. Now let me kind of explain this. So we are going to send that sulfur dioxide directly here with a quantum entangleporter. So let's grab a quantum entangleporter and we can start to build this up. There we go. So a couple of those. So one, we're going to send the item directly to this. And thankfully with the quantum entangleporter, we can auto export out of here. Now we can't with mechanism machines auto pull items from inventories, but we can auto send. So this is going to just be simply linked to our sulfur dust. We can set that, and then on our side outputs, remember we're going to take that configuration card and wipe this, and we are going to go into the items and we're going to set this to output and auto on. And so that's going to immediately send that sulfur dust over here, right? And then that is going to produce sulfur dioxide. Now by default with these machines, the right side typically is going to be the output. So by default, this is already configured, so we really don't have to do too much. We can go ahead and place down a quantum entangleporter. I'm going to wipe the settings here, and this I'm just going to set to what it is, what the product that it's going to be receiving, which is the sulfur, which is, by the way, going to be one of the most produced things we make here. Sulfur dioxide. Perfect. And then I'm going to go ahead and set that. So this side is going to receive what I believe is a fluid input from the side. So that has produced sulfur dioxide. I think it's a fluid. So sometimes I always get like mixed and matched with our fluids and gases, which is easy to do. But over here, I should be able to set fluid and gases. It really doesn't matter as the input. And notice that went away. Okay, so this is going to be considered a gas, right? And so now that I know that, I can go ahead and clear this. And we have our gas going in. And then I want to send that over to this machine. I mean, that's as simple as it's going to be. And the cool thing, which I can't show just yet, is the scalability. So then once we have all of this up and running, we maybe need more of this, we can just build another machine on top of the other one. And then we can use the configuration card to copy the settings and paste it to the machine above. And same thing goes for the quantum entangleporters. It's going to be nice. Now, this particular chemical infuser is also receiving that sulfur dioxide, but it also needs oxygen. So back here, I'm going to place another entangleporter down, and I'm going to select my oxygen channel and set this. I'm also going to go ahead and wipe the settings, making sure oxygen is still set. And then on the face, because I know this is a gas, I'm going to output automatically into this machine, and we should, if we set this one up correctly to receive this gas, we should be able to, let's see, an input, the back, we need an input, and there you go. So now we are receiving oxygen into this machine as well. So the only thing left to do is make sure this entangleporter is also taking our gas and auto outputting it into this machine here. And then we need to make sure that our input for this is also set up. So in reality, we should receive the sulfur trioxide or sulfur dioxide, sorry, into the infuser. On this machine, I just had to make sure though that the left side was set to that same color. So that's why you can move this around. And now you can see it is producing sulfur trioxide. So we just need to take that sulfur trioxide and then send it over to this machine. And this is going to have sort of the same sort of thing that needs to be done to it, except instead of oxygen, we need water vapor, which is what we've produced over here. And so now I have the water vapor and the sulfur trioxide going into this machine. And then this in return is going to start producing the sulfuric acid. And so the sulfuric acid is going to get used inside of the process of making the actual fissile fuel. But there's still some other things we need to do. We also need to make the uranium. So I'm going to set up my uranium production right in the middle. Now, making uranium oxide is as simple as just placing down two machines in reality. So we have an enrichment chamber that's going to take uranium ingots and turn it into yellow cake uranium. That yellow cake uranium is going to go into this Entangloporter. And then over here, we're going to oxidize that uranium. These machines can be upgraded. We're going to upgrade them here in a moment to make this a bit faster. But for right now, we just essentially need to make uranium oxide so that way we can create our final sort of structure here. So in this machine, I essentially just need to make sure the auto output is set on the items channel. Then that should automatically send our uranium that we're sending from over here. And then this creates yellow cake uranium, and we need to make sure that this is auto outputting into this. And so we just need to start naming these things. So after setting the gas input, I now have uranium oxide. So I just need to give these power, and these should start running. And before you know it, we're going to start seeing a bunch of uranium oxide. Now, it doesn't seem fast right now because I've not upgraded our enrichment chamber. But once we start putting speed upgrades in these, boy, things are really going to start expanding. And so now, just like the other side, we have three machines for this process, which is going to be ultimately combining everything to make the fissile fuel itself. So we're going to have three machines. We're going to have a chemical dissolution chamber. We're going to have a chemical infuser. And finally, we're going to have the isotropic centrifuge, which is what we are going to get the fissile fuel from. This thing, by the way, takes a lot of power whenever it is fully running. So just something to note, I am using Ender gates, which support up to 1 million FE per tick transfer rate, which is way more than I can even produce power for. And something to note, these machines are going to be set up very, very similar to this side. We're going to have an input that is going to be on the left. We're also going to have a secondary input that is going to be on the back. And so same thing is going to happen here. This, and we're going to have it on the back. And then last but not least, we are going to have an Entangloporter that is going to go here, that is going to send it into the centrifuge, that is then going to make fissile fuel. Now, because of how we set all of this up, it should be as easy as finding sulfuric acid, like this, setting that one, and this is going to combine sulfuric acid and fluorite. And so over here, we just need to find the fluorite and set that. And then we just need to configure the machine and make sure we are sending things in appropriately. I like to kind of clear everything, even the items, and then the gases, for example. And then on the back, we'll say input the gas on the left. That should be fine. And then we need to go in on the items and say input from the back. So this one, we'll just basically do the exact thing, same thing. We made auto input here. That should send our fluorite hopefully into this slot. And then right here, we're going to want to make sure that under gases, we are auto outputting over here, making sure that's auto on. This slot, by the way, needs to be output. There we go. So now I have sulfuric acid and fluorite going in, and then that is going to produce a product that is going to go over to this slot. Now, these two machines, or these three, I guess I should say, quantum Entangloporters, are going to be the new products we're producing. And so the thing that we just produced is hydrofluoric acid. It's the best I can do to get it in here. You can't get the whole thing to fit sometimes, but we want to make sure that this is a gas set to input. And so that should receive this underneath the gases tab. We'll set that to output. And that is now in here. And then we can start to use it in our next machine. Now our next machine is going to utilize the uranium oxide. So uranium oxide is what's going to go back here. And so there's where everything slowly starts to get combined together, and that gets combined in the chemical infuser. And those two things combined together produce, well, they produce uranium hexafluoride, which is kind of a lot. But uranium hexafluoride here, we just then need to send the output for the gas over here. So we'll have the output set. That should, once we set this to allow, There we go. We now have uranium hexafluoride, and that's where we need to then send it into the isotropic centrifuge, thus completing the entire process of making, of course, our final product, which is fissile fuel. And so, one final step, and it doesn't get any simpler than this. Auto output the fissile fuel into this machine, making sure our gas is input here and our output is out, auto output, and then fissile fuel being here, making sure it can receive the input of fissile fuel. And so we have completed fissile fuel production, but the only thing left to do is scale up. And so now this is one of my favorite parts because it just involves upgrading the machines. So energy upgrades by holding down shift and put the speed upgrades in, and so on and so forth into all of these machines. And this is where all of our power that we haven't been using is now going to start getting used, because these machines get very expensive as far as actually working goes. Especially these machines. Like, I know this one goes very, very high as far as the cost that it takes to run. I don't even know if it's running at full speed right now. Yeah, 204,000 FE per tick to produce. But over here, we're going to run out of oxygen, so we're going to need this electrolytic separator to definitely be filled up fast. And we're also going to need our condenser. So yeah, I almost made enough energy. Looks like I need a few more energy. I'm going to go ahead and get that. I've got a sand issue, by the way. I've got to eventually solve that sand issue. But yes, these should be able to easily scale and be able to handle everything that we just produced. So I'm going to scale this one up. Make sure the speeds upgrades in that. And so now we're going to run into a water issue, but that's as simple as using a pipe upgrade. Now, you don't have to use pipe upgrades for these. Like, you don't have to use pipes at all. You can use any pipe. I just happen to just put pipes in here, and that just keeps up easily. And I'm also starting to really love, like, I just love the actual color and look of the pipe. All of the other pipes are just, yeah, they're no-go for me. Now, there is one special machine that you do need to worry about putting gas burning upgrades in, and that is the chemical dissolution chamber. So be sure to put those gas burning upgrades in there so it doesn't use as much of the gas in order to produce the fissile fuel. That is a major thing that you definitely don't want to mess up. And then, of course, making sure our enrichment chamber is ready to go. Just like that, all the way upgraded, and making sure that is getting split up, and making sure we can get this over here fast enough. Now, notice the chemical oxidizer, it already at this point can't keep up. So this is where scaling up our chemical oxidizers is probably going to be one of the first things we need to do when we start to fully upgrade this. And thankfully, if I go ahead and show that, I can show you why I set this machine up the way that I have. So we're going to need Entangloporters, right? So I'm going to grab some Entangloporters, and I'll show you just how smooth this is to actually set up. So you just need to place, for example, your machine directly on top of the other machine. So just like that, and so on and so forth. And then we just need to grab our Entangloporters, like so, place them down, also making sure to face like sort of the same direction that your original ones were placed, just like this. And then all we have to do is just take our configuration card, copy the settings here, and paste them into these two machines. Copy the settings here, paste them into these two machines. And then copy the settings from this, paste them into these machines. And that's as simple. That's all we have to do to scale up the production. It will actually set the frequency and everything. And so all of our machines are now ready to go. And the only thing left to do is just give them power. And that should start now expanding. And we do the same thing for this setup. And so now something that I really wanted to look at was, can I keep up with just this current level that we have set here? Because I know that with these machines set up the way they are currently, I know that this does produce quite a bit of fissile fuel, able to support quite a large setup already. But I'm looking here and noticing it does seem like that we are dwindling in our sulfur essence. And so it would be probably good to at least get another seed added into our machine up there. And now I was also looking at my uranium seeds and found out that I needed way more uranium seed setups. So I have a bunch of uranium seeds now set up here and a couple at the top, and those are now keeping up with this. Yes, it is now keeping up with the amount that we are currently using. By having a couple more of these, I mean, this honestly bumps up our fissile fuel production rate a little bit, but we are going to be able to upgrade our actual phytogrows here soon, and we'll be able to make upgrades in those machines that are very, very crazy in speed. And then we won't have to have as many individual setups on those phytogenics. We'll just be able to really, really focus in on the ones we need. But as you can see, this right here is producing a ton of fissile fuel. We are running this, I believe, at nearly max. And yes, we are producing a lot of millibuckets per tick worth of fissile fuel. And like I said, it's just scalable. So if we need to make more whenever we get our actual reactor up and running, then we just keep adding to these machines. Just keep building them up as needed to be able to increase the amount. And everything is scalable. So even these items over here with our electrolytic separator are scalable. If we need to make more oxygen and hydrogen, it's scalable. And that is what is super important, in my opinion, when it comes to setting up this fuel. Because the faster that we can produce fissile fuel, the faster we can produce antimatter and polonium pellets and all kinds of other stuff. Now, next episode, I am going to be setting up that fission reactor. And we're going to set it up in the safest way possible. And I'm going to also kind of explain how we can bypass tons of the mechanism kind of requirements by just utilizing one other mod, integrated dynamics. And we can use that to send this reactor as much water as it could ever need. We just have to figure out a way to get rid of all the steam that it produces, because typically you would use that steam to produce power, but we don't really want to do that. Or at least I don't want to do that. But we'll be setting that up next episode. So guys, I hope you did enjoy today's episode. Hopefully you learned something new, whether it was about the mechanism setup or any other topics that we covered today. But if you guys did enjoy, like I said, be sure to smack that subscribe button if you haven't already, and give this video a huge thumbs up. It does take a lot of time to put these videos together, and it's taken years of experience to sort of understand enough to be able to make videos to do this. So if you would, be sure, like I said, just click that subscribe button. Comment down below, by the way, if there's another way that you've set this up and you want to share it with other people. I would love to also hear from you down in the comments below. And with that being said, it's now time to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. That amazing thanks is going to go out to Mr. Fahrenheit. Thank you, by the way, for your amazing support by choosing to support me over on the Discord and become a Discord premium member and support me in honestly one of the best ways possible. Of course, guys, I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. And, well, you know how it goes. As always, thanks for watching. Bye!